Thank you so much, by the way, for all of those who had sent emails to us concerning last night's show. It was fantastic. It was just an incredible response that we got.
We got
I couldn't believe.
So much feedback.
Yeah, I really couldn't believe the feedback we got, and it was all positive. And thanks, because that way we know if we're on the right track, and we like to, customer satisfaction, client satisfaction, listener satisfaction is something that we take very seriously. And this is something that, I don't see many radio programs covering the real reason why. For example, why is there a Bohemian Grove? Why is there all of this this paganistic, ritualistic kind of activity?
Yeah.
Why do people talk about the Super Bowl and the Olympics? Go ahead.
Well, I was studying some things today, several old writings that are referred to in Paul McGuire's book and many others. We hear about these secret, the Manly P. Hall books, the Alice Bailey's, the Albert Pike's. So I was reading some of these, and among one of the books I was read today was The Secret Destiny of America by Manly P. Hall. And he talks about why these secret societies, well, not only why, but how and what the purpose is. And he writes in here about how secret societies are here and have been here since the ancient of times in order to, I'm looking for my highlighted part, to bring in the new world, which they see as a brotherhood, and there's actually a chapter in his book, The Democratic Tradition Preserved by Secret Societies, and it goes on to say, secret societies have had a concealment and protection as for the first purpose of their existence. The members of these orders were party to some special knowledge. They usually took certain rites and rituals not available to non-members. It was important that through these societies, they were also able to practice beliefs, doctrines in private for which they would have been condemned and persecuted if these rites were made public. The second purpose for secret societies was to create a mechanism for the perpetuation from generation to generation of policies, principles, and systems of learning confined to a limited group of select and initiated persons. And it goes on from there to talk about...
That's very meaningful.
Yeah. I mean, it goes on to talk about there. It says, for more than 3,000 years, secret societies have labored to create a background of knowledge necessary for the establishment of an enlightened democracy among the nations of the world. And, I mean, there's so much in this book and the other ones. It's amazing.
As the program unfolds tonight, what we've decided to do, folks, is we're going to go through, hit some very important news stories for the first segment, for the first hour, and then following that, we're going to continue progress with what we talked about last night. Continue on from our discussion last night. We believe it's that important. I had it's interesting. We had a listener send us a photograph in McDonald's, and I'm sure you've perhaps seen this, listeners, if you've gone to McDonald's, where you can actually pay for your meals through a debit card, but it's a independent station where you put your card in, or you swipe your card, or it's through the RFID process. It captures the information, and you don't have to swipe it. And it's interesting because the picture is it's really worth 1,000 words, and it does speak to what we're going through. It does speak to certain symbols, events. Pay with ISIS, ISIS. Now, I understand ISIS is a mechanism, but when you look at these acronyms, we are being conditioned in such a way. ISIS that way, and ISIS with the Islamic Society of Iraq and Syria.
It's also an ancient,
right.
pagan god.
Exactly.
And when I remember Michael called in and we asked him why the use of these names were so prevalent today, and he said it is a form of paying tribute.
Well, and that's exactly right. And one of the things we said yesterday too, and we'll get into the news right after this, is one of the things we talked about was the use of money with the pagan symbolism on our fiat currency, American dollars, for example, the seal and such. And we're going to get into this the second hour. It provides empowerment to those who believe. Now, again, it's not necessary for us to believe it, but the empowerment that's provided through the symbology, through the symbolism, is critical to the belief system of those who are attempting to take us over or to agenda on us.
And Dad, I sent you that link, and if you open that link up to that PDF on page 45, it has the symbols of the Great Seal of the U.S. This is from the Manly P. Hall book, The Secret Destiny of America. It says, is the American eagle actually a phoenix? The selection of this fabulous bird of the ancients seems to have been the intention of the designer of the nation's Great Seal. The phoenix is a symbol of reborn wisdom. The design on the reverse of the Great Seal is even more definitively related to the order of the quest, the pyramid, and the all-seeing eye, representative of the universal house, surmounted by the radiant emblem of the great architecture of the universe. These three symbols in combination is more than chance or coincidence.
Precisely.
And we'll get into that in the second hour.
I want to make an announcement, folks, as well. Monday, that's this coming Monday, the guerrilla economist, Steve Quayle, talking about the dead bankers. Now, I've been in research and investigation. I've conducted inquiries with respect to the bigger picture behind the bankers, the dead bankers. Now, if you haven't heard about this, or if you're just vaguely familiar about this, in the last 3 weeks, there have been 7 bankers who have reportedly committed suicide, one, in fact, by at least 7, if not 8 shots with a nail gun. And, of course, the authorities in Colorado, the law enforcement officers in Colorado, and along with the medical examiner, suggest or have stated that it looks like a suicide.
Now, these are the reported ones. I heard...
Well, correct. You're going to say that you heard like 19 or 20, right? Right. Gerald Salenti came out and said, I think there were 20.
Somebody told me that today. That's what I mentioned, that right. We only hearing about what's publicized, and there's possibly more unpublicized.
Well, there are more, but here's what we have to do, and this is why I believe it's important. We've got to look at the bigger picture. We can throw in the entirety of the bankers who have. Well, let's say there are 20. There are some in there that don't seem to fit. I mean, they're worth mentioning. Their deaths are worth mentioning. However, when we look at this, we're looking at people, key people, with information, or having the ability to perhaps reveal an agenda, and we're looking for the nexus, for the connections. Folks, I've never seen this movie, but I did read the plot summary synopsis of the International movie from, in fact, it's funny because as I was going through this, it was exactly 5 years ago today, the 13th of February 2009, when the movie The International was released in the U.S., and this is about an Interpol agent attempting to expose a high-profile financial institution's role in international arms-dealing ring. And what happens is, essentially, I'm not going to spoil the plot or what's going on here, or the actual plot storyline, but there's an Interpol agent along with a DA, and they're determined to bring some of the most powerful people, some of the most powerful banks to justice, and they've uncovered illegal activities such as money laundering and arms trading, and the destabilization of governments. Well, their investigation takes them across the world and so on, but they're finding that every time they grab a hold of, or focus in on, zero in on a subject or a person of interest, they wind up either suicided or involved in an accident or otherwise dead. It's an interesting parallel. Is life imitating art, or is the cinema imitating death? I mean, it's interesting. So it's just totally. There's a huge part to this. Now, I spoke with V today again, and we were talking about the implications with respect to what's going on in the energy sector and how you and I are going to be affected by this. Gold, right now we're seeing the certain markets, certain oil, for example, via Iran, Iranian oil, the purchase of Iranian oil being settled in gold. This is a kick to the U.S. dollar as the petrodollar, with the intent, and with the intent of killing the U.S. dollar. The intent of the globalists is to take down the U.S. dollar, and if I recall putting up the YouTube, or not the YouTube, but the article about we will just kill the U.S. dollar, got a lot of flack about that. And then the article itself was narrated on YouTube. I believe the username or the channel was Snordster, an exceptionally well done YouTube presentation. Well, this is at the heart of what we're seeing today, because I suspect, and this is what V had said, and Steve Quayle talked with him as well, and others, and they all said, look, we're seeing some house cleaning being done. These people know, or are in a position to know what's going on. They're in a position to testify, and the powers that be, the powers that are not going to allow this. But here's the frightening thing, or it should be frightening to those people in the industry. There will be more. There will be more. Expect more. It's not over. The purge is not over by a long shot.
How many have to go out before we could fix our economic problems? Or does the elimination of bankers altogether have no difference in
No. The eradication of bankers is not to fix anything. The eradication of these bankers is to ensure that those complicit in the killing of the dollar, the changing of the financial structure, the geopolitics of it all as well. And folks, don't forget, this is connected to what's going on in Syria as well as the Middle East. This is connected to what's going on all across the globe, because money is behind all of the wars. This is connected to the opium trade. I mean, the money is the common thread behind all of this. It's not about fixing anything. It's about taking people out that could take people down, the power elite down, whether they're those people who have met their untimely and very unfortunate demise, whether they either intentionally or unintentionally stumbled upon information that endangered their lives. Think Hastings, think Breitbart, think in that kind of capacity or in that similarity. This is what we have here. Look, when you work a murder case and you're looking at potential suspects, and you've got a murderer, or we'll say a group, or a gang who is involved in murder and other felonious activity, and let's just say you've got some people who are on the periphery who just happen to see things or involved in things, they're going to be the targets of this gang. Now, keep in mind, the stock market is doing well. So the question is, why now? Why now? The answer is because it's necessary in order to take the market down and to implement the global objectives. I constantly see when this subject is talked about, and this is why I'm very anxious to get this report out. It's gonna be an extensive report, perhaps broken down into a couple of different segments. I talked to Judy McLeod at Canada Free Press today as well, very interested in this, and Steve Quayle very interested in this. When this comes out, it's going to explain everything. So, but I've seen people, Joe, talk about this on different forums and not getting the enormity of the lie, not understanding the enormity of what's going on here. And even some people, despite the presence of corpses, are saying, well, there's really nothing to see here. At what time? I mean, we've got a trail of dead bodies, a dead pool of financial bankers, insiders. What would it take to convince the captured corporate media to have the integrity, the journalistic integrity, to take a look at the bigger picture and say, wait a minute, there's something wrong here? Especially when they won't even do so, when a 57-year-old Richard Talley is found in his Colorado home, pummeled by 7 or 8 nail gun wounds. I mean, that's look, folks, that's a painful death, and of course, that's being ruled a suicide. Is it possible? Well, I suppose. I suppose it's possible, but in the context of the bigger picture, is it probable or likely? No. So it really concerns me when I see otherwise rational people, for example, talking about this on the various political boards and survival boards, and well, I'll just stop there, saying, well, there's really, in the scheme of things, it's not really important. Oh, it's all of important. And I did verify that V had predicted this weeks in advance of this purging, weeks in advance of the actual first death that occurred in January. So this is coming out. This is coming out. I'll have this done by the morning without fail, and it's going to be a pretty comprehensive picture of what we're looking at. But this is important because as this will affect all of us, whether you're listening to this in the UK or Europe, elsewhere, or the United States or Canada. You'll all be affected by what's coming down the pike with respect to the taking out of the U.S. dollar as a world's reserve currency, and then the collapsing of the dollar, which will spread absolute pain, suffering, and ill will against the United States all across the globe. The times ahead will not be for the faint of heart. So please don't underestimate what's going on. This is just one segment of one part, one component of the deaths are just one component of what's taking place. The bigger picture. We've got to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to the article that you're going to report. You're going to be putting out, and it should be good. So look for that tomorrow for sure. Getting into some news here, I want to open with this story as we talked about the Connecticut gun situation yesterday. And for those who might have missed yesterday, this was the headline from RT. Tens of thousands of Connecticut residents to refuse registering guns under the new law. And we talked about that basically there's a law in Connecticut now that if you don't register your guns, you risk having them confiscated, and they'll be illegal. And how far would the police and the administrations, government take this? Because only 47,916 guns were registered, and there was at least, they said approximately, it could be as high as 350,000 unregistered gun owners. So, you have a huge majority of people not registering their weapons, and we have laws now that are put in place that say that's illegal if you don't register your weapons. Today, officials in Connecticut, stunned by what could be a massive statewide act of civil disobedience by gun owners. On January 1st, 2014, tens of thousands of defiant gun owners seemingly made the choice not to register their semi-automatic rifles with the state of Connecticut, as required by a hastily passed gun control law. By possessing unregistered so-called assault rifles, they are all technically guilty of committing a Class D felonies overnight. Police received 49,916 applications for assault weapon certificates and 21,000 incomplete applications. At roughly 50,000 applications, officials estimate that's as little as 15%. So, needless to say, officials and some lawmakers are stunned due to the new gun control bill passed in April. Likely, at least 20,000 individual people, possibly as many as 100,000 now, are in direct violation of the law for refusing to register their guns. Mike Lawler, state's top official in criminal justice, suggested maybe the firearms unit in Connecticut could send a letter. However, an aggressive push to prosecute gun owners in the state is not going to happen at this point. Lawler, the Undersecretary for Criminal Justice Policy in the state Office of Policy and Management, also suggested that the legislature should reopen the registration period and encourage more gun owners to register their firearms. In this article from The Blaze says, you may recall the viral photo of Connecticut gun owners waiting in line to register their guns in December, which one person said reminded them of the Weimar Germany. It goes on to say Republican State Senator Tony Guglielmello told the Current he recently spoke at a constituent meeting in Ashford, who informed him that some of his friends with semi-automatic rifles are intentionally taking a stand. He made an analogy to prohibition, the lawmaker said. I said, you're talking about civil disobedience, and he said yes. Other officers think the low registration numbers are due to ignorance on behalf of gun owners who aren't aware of the new law. It's impossible to know the main reason why gun owners are not showing up to register their guns without hearing from them directly, though the constituents of the senator say at least some are practicing civil disobedience. And sorting through the numbers of political new felons and a guessing game, state police have not added up the total number of people who registered their firearms. Vance said, so even if we knew the number of illegal guns in the state, we'd have a hard time knowing how many owners they had. And that's that story. But
before you move on, I just want to, folks, history. We talk about history, and once again, a lot of things are said, and with the expectation, things are said in sound bites. For example, communism has killed upwards of 150 million people. But when you get into the conservative, yeah, right. But when you get into the actual architecture of how, one of the very first things to take place is gun registration. Notice I said registration. I'm not talking about confiscation. That comes later. Go back to the Ottoman Turkish Empire from 1915 to 1917. The targets were mostly Christians, Armenians, for example. 1.5 million people were killed, civilians were killed. The features of the overall gun control laws that were enacted were that permits were required. Governments maintained a list of owners, and there was a ban on possession of weapons. That was back in 1915. So when you have people, if you are sitting at the table with your progressively minded family, uncle, friend, whatever, and they start talking about, well, this is just to keep the guns out of the hands of criminals, or this is just merely, it's not going to really have any effect. You can point out Ottoman Turkey, 1915 to 1970, 1.5 million people, mostly Christians, were murdered by their government through a 1911 proclamation requiring gun registration. And of course, the Soviet Union, 20 million people, we all know that. They licensed gun owners. Then they banned the possession. And of course, the severe penalties came later.
Yeah, and we see how the current administration is ignoring laws. making things up as they go. Well, how does it feel? You know, if you're going to ignore laws, why not have the citizens ignore laws? They're just following what you do.
Well, of course, the law as we know it, and as folks, as you should, if you're living in Connecticut, or regardless of which state you're living in, the law, the state laws, these incredible pieces of legislation are in direct violation of the United States Constitution. So the individual or the entity who is committing the greater crime here are the very people who passed the law, which is really not a law if it doesn't comport to the United States Constitution. The argument, I know, is that, of course, this would have to be litigated. Except, look, but consider this: you're dealing the topic you're talking about, Joe, is the Connecticut issue. Even a conservative in Connecticut is so far left on the political spectrum that's really an archaic piece of. It's really archaic, but even a conservative would be classified as a liberal, and a liberal, of course, a progressive or a socialist. But with this, imagine waking up today knowing you're a Class B felon. That's a pretty good thing of civil disobedience.
Well, I mean, here they're not taking any action; their inaction is what is the civil disobedience. But it is still
right. It's passive civil disobedience, but the way we see it, and after looking at this from a historical perspective, the next move, whose move is it now? The next move is on the part of the state.
Yep.
So what is going to happen, as we said last night, we've got to pay very close attention to what happens, because we know that there's going to be beta testing done. And I certainly believe, from my perspective here, and talking with a few people in the know about this, they are going to take, using the forms that have already been, the federal forms that have already been filled out, they're going to make a couple of examples, very high-profile examples out of certain individuals and groups, or individuals in particular.
I hope they don't use drones.
Well, yeah. But they will make some high-profile examples out of those who have failed to comply in order to intimidate those who are at home with their weapons. Because they, at this point, it's a logics problem. They cannot go door to door at this point in time for confiscation. That's not to say that that's not in their plans or that they can't. It's just say they're not. I'm just saying that they probably will not do that. Coming out, it looks like they're going to make some examples, very high-profile examples, and that's how it's going to play out. So the state lawmakers, and I say lawmakers because that's how people look at them, made a bad law, made a law that's not consistent with the U.S. Constitution. And the people, through their passive resistance, have spoken. The state is going to take it to a new level, and when that happens, we're going to see some pretty ugly things here in the short term, or perhaps in the midterm.
Did you see what happened in California today with the gun rights?
Well, why don't you explain what happened?
Court strikes California law restricting concealed weapons. California must allow law-abiding citizens to carry concealed firearms publicly. A federal appeals court ruled Thursday, striking down the core of the state's permit system for handguns. A 2-1 decision in the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco and San Diego County violates the Constitution's Second Amendment by requiring residents to show good cause and not merely the desire to protect themselves to obtain a concealed weapons permit. State law requires applicants to demonstrate good cause as well as a good moral character to conceal handguns, while leaving the permit process up to each city and county. The ruling, if it stands, would require local governments to issue permits to anyone who claims a need for self-protection. Well, I mean, it's a win because what was in place was they had an open carry law in California. They banned it.
Right.
Then in 2008, the court ruled that the Second Amendment protects the right to keep and bear handguns or guns in the home for self-defense, but has not defined its application in carrying weapons in public. And
well, okay, yeah, correct. But
so California has some of the nation's toughest gun laws, according to this article, or the strongest restrictions on gun ownership. And this weapons permit, denying the concealed weapons permit, they were doing what we were seeing done in New York. You have to state a purpose as to why you feel you need a firearm or a permit to carry a firearm. You have to say you have some kind of risk, or I mean, who knows? You can't say it's my right.
Way, it's pretty much that way throughout the entirety of the United States. When you apply for your weapons permit, concealed weapons permit, you've got to show, or you've got to prove, state your reason for a concealed carry.
In PA, can't you write on there, it's my law, it's my right as a citizen of this country?
Well, that's done by county, and it's different. But self-defense is an all-encompassing reason. You can't attach, for example, the Second Amendment to your application, but essentially by saying self-defense, that's kind of what you're doing, not to infringe upon your Second Amendment rights. But
a good quote I saw, or a comment I saw, says this: "Free men do not ask permission."
Very true. Very, very true. And folks, let me go on record. Let this show go on record. Let the Hagmann and Hagmann Report go on record that we stand behind those individuals in Connecticut who are refusing or not obeying this unconstitutional law. We would, given the same situation, also not comply, because it's not the law. The U.S. Constitution must be respected. It cannot be abridged or made of lesser effect. Nowhere in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights is it stated expressly that the Congress, the judiciary, the president, state governments, municipalities, town boards, I don't care what it is, or any form of government can abolish, infringe upon, reshape, alter, amend, abridge, whatever you want to call it, the people to keep and bear arms in their inherent right of self-defense, as guaranteed by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Nowhere does it state in the Constitution and Bill of Rights that the government or its servants have the right to ban guns because they are inexpensive or for any other stupid reason, nor can they prohibit their manufacture. So for that reason, the implication being that the guns come under interstate commerce, as we've seen in a number of areas, thereby depriving poor members of our communities of their inherent right to self-defense because they can't afford guns that cost more. This is an act of discrimination that's forbidden by the Constitution, by the Bill of Rights. We are looking at, during the Bush years, this was not pursued aggressively on the federal level. Now it is. Right. And not only is it being pursued on the federal level, now the states having a very cozy relationship, or a very good working relationship with the DOJ as well as the federal government, are now jumping onto this bandwagon and saying, okay, by 2016, we should be able to completely eradicate weapon ownership, and institute gun control laws here in the United States.
Now, let me ask you this. Was the reason the guns were not coming, we didn't see the push for gun control under Bush, was it because it wasn't time in their agenda yet to do this? And if we have an election in 2016 and a conservative is elected, will that agenda continue?
Well, the latter, it's not going to happen. the former, with respect to Bush, yeah, I do believe that there was this foreknowledge of what was going to be taking place here in that time period in the post-Bush United States. So, if, for example, if they knew, and I believe that they had reason to know, pretty much who was going to be running things, then the list of priorities were just that. I mean, it would be a lot easier to know that you would have a very, a workable executive branch, a workable judicial branch of government, and even the Supreme Court as well. Folks, don't put your, I'm sounding the warning bells on any Supreme Court rulings concerning the Second Amendment, because I don't believe they're going to be for the people. And we're going to have some decisions coming up that could very well affect and overturn the Heller decision and other Supreme Court laws. So right now, this is extremely dangerous, and couple that with the Small Arms Treaty, the Arms Trade Treaty. The objective here is clear. The United Nations influence, the globalist influence on this is extreme, and right now there's never been a greater threat to our liberties under the Constitution, our God-given rights for self-defense, and of course the delineation of self-defense under the Constitution than right now. Folks, please pay attention, because you're going to see this. And I do suspect, I do predict a severe backlash against those in Connecticut who have failed to comply. As I had stated earlier, there will be a backlash. People are talking about, how great this is where there's civil disobedience, and I totally agree. But with that, we have to be cautious, because this also sets the stage for false flag events. You want to demonize those people who are holdouts. Think of it this way: anyone who's holding out for and being a civil disobedient player here. Imagine what would happen if there was a shooting at a school, and all of a sudden we come to find out, or it's said on the media, the perpetrator was in fact a holdout. Already a Class D felon for not registering the weapon in which it was used. Aside from a veteran and or it could be all the above.
Yeah, but no, you make a great point that just imagine, Sandy Hook happening tomorrow and them saying, of course it was a man who failed to register their firearms. If their firearms were registered, this likely would not have happened. Some outrageous statement.
You've got to watch the Brady, Sarah Brady, the Brady Initiative. Look, I feel very, very sorry for Jim Brady, who was shot during the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan back in 1981. Of course, there's compassion, there's human compassion there. But when they use that incident, as well as the shooting of Gabrielle Giffords, when they become advocates for the anti-constitutional law, and they are, and they will continue to be, we're fighting a pretty formidable foe, ladies and gentlemen. This is by design. This is by orchestrated design. Don't forget, Obama, during the early years, had told Sarah Brady that they were going to pass this legislation, the Brady Bill on steroids, and make it essentially make guns illegal in the United States. This is coming, or through registration and then subsequent confiscation. That's their goal. So I understand who we're dealing with. It's like we talked about last night. You've got to look at the enemy's playbook, and especially on this, don't be fooled, and expect incident or incidents to happen. And look back to, just very briefly, remember 1998, the great gun grab of 1998. You had a series of successes, legal successes, court rulings, taking advantage of what happened in Littleton, Colorado, the rash of school shootings that had erupted over, across the country. School shootings happened, folks, under extremely suspicious circumstances. Think about that. And we talk about, for example, I don't want to go too far out on a rabbit trail here, but you talk about the MK Ultra program. You talk about mind control. Well, how do you go? How do you talk about mind control and about these Manchurian candidates and the products of CIA experimentation and university experimentation funded by our federal government? And come to find out, you've got these very people who are involved in that, or victims of that, involved in these shootings. So, what we're going to see here is really, I do believe, in tandem with the making certain examples of certain entities in Colorado, people in Colorado, you're also going to see an eruption, perhaps a new eruption, or very surgically precise eruptions of school shooting, instances of school shootings or shootings, period, that will reinstitute talk of the great gun ban grab, just like we saw in 1998. So, and also you're going to have activist judges. Remember, one of the most notorious enemies of the right of people to bear arms back then was Judge Decker, who took an oath to uphold the Constitution, but constantly violating it. I think it was the ninth. Well, you know what? I'm not exactly certain what congressional district or what the judicial district Judge Decker was involved in. But what he did was try to fragment the Constitution. You can follow this trail really in earnest back into not only into the 90s, but you can go back into the 80s and even the 70s. This has been a long time in coming. This has been set up, and Hollywood's going to jump in on this as well. You're going to have proponents in Hollywood. You're going to have but the states, watch the municipalities, watch the counties in which, or the parishes in the states in which you live. And if you're listening to this outside of the United States, watch for stricter enforcement of those countries who are already under the, or have a gun ban, gun registration, gun control mechanism in place under the Arms Trade Treaty under the United Nations. This is what, trust me, this is where we're headed here. They're going to double down. They, meaning the globalists who don't, because see, they cannot afford, Joe, they can't afford to have an armed populace at this point. They cannot afford to have an armed populace because of what's coming. So just understand that.
I don't know if that's, in my opinion, I don't know if that's true, because I don't know if what's coming, something so horrific or devastating could happen that it would just numb people. I mean, it wouldn't be thinking about, weapons. They could just be so shocked. And at first, just imagine at night, everybody goes to sleep, night like tonight, you wake up and the majority of people are sleeping at night. You have very few people who are working third shift. You wake up and there's troops on every street, checkpoints.
Right.
You understand what I mean? To where, it could, what you're saying probably is the case, but I see calamities happening that could happen where it wouldn't make a difference either way.
Well, then let me ask you why.
If you think if a nation invades the United States, wouldn't they want the citizens to have guns?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It depends on one's perspective, and it depends on one's plans and objectives, we have to remember that the globalists, the people, the power brokers, their objectives never change, haven't changed, won't change. And that's for the subjugation, the imprisonment of all of the free citizens all across the world to be beholden to one system of economics, one political system, and one religious system. That's their ultimate goal. That's why we're talking about the things we talked about last night. We'll talk about it later. But see, this gun registration / confiscation, ultimately, and using Connecticut as an example, and Glenn, I think Glenn Beck talked about this today. So I've heard from people who listen to him. Well, go deeper, go a little bit further, understand, put this in the context of the current events. I believe that's necessary to understand. So, yes, I mean, you would think that in a perfect world with moral people of conscience, leaders, that is, moral leaders, you would want your citizens well-armed, well-trained, and there as a doorstop or there as a secondary or line of defense against any type of foreign invasion. But we have our government inviting people into the United States who are not citizens of the United States. They're foreign troops. And I just read a comment today on one of these forums, just because I'm interested to see what other people's thoughts are. And they're saying, oh, people who say that foreign troops are on the soil, on U.S. soil, they're outright stupid. Why? Because where else are you going to train? At first blush, it seems to be, all right, well, that does make sense in a twisted, convoluted sort of way. We're the best in the world, so the training, sure, we can train them, but not in the manner in which they are being trained for urban combat, urban warfare, and for the policing. I mean, look at that. See, by itself, every incident by itself, for example, Connecticut, by itself, it's a data point. Think about the training drills that the United States had superintended of foreign troops and of our own troops preparing for urban combat here in the United States. And even in places in Iraq and Afghanistan where the troops already were, yet none was being done. There was no urban combat being conducted. The rules of engagement disallowed that. Folks, look, it's easy for a person, and you've kind of looked too at the profiles or posting history of these people who are very influential or seemingly influential to turn the tide of a thread of a forum. That reaches an untold number of people. I think sometimes it's called hijacking a thread, or just actually turning the discussion. But look, it's for example, this person said training has been historically conducted here in the United States. That's a true statement, but that takes away from the details, and the devil literally is in the details. So while the one statement, while A might be true, B is not true. Yet people focus on A, the first part of the statement. So I guess what I'm saying, this is a very dangerous period in time. And when I talked to V today, we were talking about the gun confiscation as well, or gun registration that will lead to confiscation. And he said, yeah, look at what's taking place with the bankers, along with the military, and then the objectives of the geopolitical objectives of not just the United States, but the Brits and the French and NATO and such. What are they doing? You just can't look at one thing. You look at the entire thing, the entire picture, because then you've got a good idea of how all the interconnectivity of all of these events. If you just limit your discussion, for example, to Connecticut gun laws, civil disobedience, ain't it great, period. While that might be accurate, you're not understanding how it fits into the objectives of those who want to subjugate us to a more nefarious agenda. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, very much.
All right.
Okay, let's hit another story here. The Department of Homeland Security has created a new national license plate registration or recognition system. Did you see this story on the internet today? Homeland Security to activate national license plate recognition plan or database. The DHS is to activate a national license plate tracking system that will be shared with law enforcement, allowing DHS officers to take photos of any license plate using their smartphone and upload it to a database which will include a hot list of target vehicles. The details are included in a PDF attachment uploaded yesterday to a federal business opportunities website under the solicitation entitled National License Plate Recognition Database. The system will track vehicles' license plate numbers that pass through cameras or voluntarily entered into the system from a variety of sources, access control systems, asset recovery specialists, etc., and uploaded to share with law enforcement in order to help locate criminal, aliens, and others. In some countries, they have license plate tracking networks, like the UK, and they have vehicles added to a hot list after attending protests, political protests. So political activists have been targeted in other countries using the same type of new technology. So innocent people are being increasingly treated with suspicion due to a tiny chance that some offense may be committed. That from David Janik. The DHS database will allow authorities to determine where and when the vehicle has traveled using data compiled from a variety of sources nationwide, including metropolitan areas within the U.S., suggesting the system may be linked in with regular surveillance cameras as it is in the U.K. It will also allow DHS officials to take a picture of any license plate via their smartphone, upload it to their database immediately, receive an alert if the plate is on a watch list. And it also says the system must have the capability to flag license plates and conduct searches anonymously so that other law enforcement agencies may not have access.
Heck of a news for everyone. This is already in progress. I talked with a high-ranking police official in New York City with the NYPD. I shouldn't say New York City. They already have this installed in several of the vehicles. Now, what you're talking about is the equivalent of a smartphone application. That's fine, but they already have this very equipment installed with NYPD, but they're also taking this at a federal level and through federal monies to the municipalities who agreed to take this, and who wouldn't agree. Which municipality wouldn't agree to take this? So This is coming to a town near you, folks, if it's not already there.
Well, what they're saying here in the article is that the National License Plate database is one thing, and street cameras, highway cameras, and lights and such already are going to be connected to this network. But what they're saying about the smartphones are DHS officials, wherever they are, have their phones, can snap a picture of any plate and not only get entered into a database, but can receive information if that
in real time.
Entered. Correct.
Yeah, right, in real time. And this, they've already got those capabilities. That infrastructure has been around for a while. The database itself, or the other side of that equation, for example, if you've got a car that's parked on just whatever city in which you might live, if your car is parked on the side of the road, and I've seen this in action once again in New York City. But if you got a car on the side of the road, they can drive by that using their. It's more than a camera system. But think of it as the easiest way to explain this would be a camera that's attached to a computer or a modem. Modem, yeah, I guess that's the way to say it, where the data is actually captured in real time, funneled through the computer modem, transmitted immediately to the data center. I'm not clear exactly where these if there's more than one, or if there's hops between state and then federal data centers, but ultimately the federal government has the data center for this. It's like facial recognition for license plates. You have to understand too, there has to be a pool of faces or a pool of license plates already on file. Well, the federal government has collected all of the license plates from the 50 states here in the United States. They know there's a huge database of all of the state license plates at the federal level. So this is already in progress, or has been in progress. The only refinement is what the person, either the federal or the state agent or the state law enforcement officer, the only refinement there is they're getting the ping back of information in real time. Now, is in good hands, in moral, upright, righteous hands, of course, that would be a good thing. In theory, right? In a perfect world. But think of it this way. What happens if, for example, you're labeled a political or a dissident or a religious zealot or an anti-Second Amendment zealot? Because, see, if you notice and pay very close attention at the rallies in which you attend, let's say you drive there and you park your car a block or 2 blocks or 3 blocks away from the event, watch what's going on, not at the rally, but at your cars. You'll see people, you'll see agents, law enforcement officers taking photographs of your vehicles, meaning to say your license plate. We saw it here in this town.
There's video of it, thanks to our friend Patriot John.
That's correct. I want to answer, before we hit the break here, I want to answer, TJ, I got a couple of emails from you about Jim Garrow, and I think I got another email about Jim Garrow as well from someone else. Folks, we had Jim Garrow on our show on February 5th, which was a week ago yesterday.
And was it January 1st?
January 1st, right, but people are under the impression, or a couple of people are under the impression, that we were going to have Jim Garrow on. We already had him on for 3 hours on February 5th. He will come back, but he's busy doing other interviews at the moment. There is no date for him to come back yet. He's certainly, we'll schedule him again for, but he was on our entire show on February 5th. So for those who missed it, Jim Garrow was on our program on February 5th. For whatever reason, I've been getting a lot of emails saying, when is Jim Garrow? You said that Jim Garrow was going to be on this week. No, I don't recall saying that. It was February 5th, but that's for your information. Also, let me remind the people just joining us via other stations, via other listening formats, that on Monday we're going to have the guerrilla economist, and Steve Quayle talking about the Deadpool, and this will go off of, I believe, what a pretty definitive investigation, connecting some dots on not the suicides, but the taking out of these bankers, the connections between these, and there are connections, but as we always say, people aren't looking at the larger picture. We know you are, ladies and gentlemen, but most people out there are just confining themselves to this narrow focus of the bankers themselves.
Also, we will be on Brother Marcus's show on Saturday at 9 p.m. Pine Ridge Warriors here on Blog Talk Radio. Brother Marcus and his son Curtis. We will be guests of their show Saturday 9 p.m. here on Pine Ridge Warriors here on Blog Talk Radio. So do not miss that, folks. We're up against the top of the hour break. We're going to take that now, and we'll be right back after these short messages. Stay with us.
Part number 2 of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Thanks for hanging with us. We appreciate all of our listeners. We look upon you as extended family. Thank you so very much for your support, your prayers, and for being with us. We really appreciate that. folks, you can find us at our home base at homelandsecurityus.com. There tomorrow, an exclusive and I believe an explosive report about the bankers, what's going on there. And of course, in CanadaFreePress.com as well. And yesterday we had talked about a couple of different things, but we focused primarily on these occult holidays and the pagan holidays for the reasons that some people might find a little bit difficult to understand. I did at first until you understand the playbook of the people, and until you reveal the true anti-Christian doctrine, the true anti-Jesus doctrine, the playbook, and how they intend to capture, deceive, and to enslave, imprison, and ultimately exterminate the population. Really, everything else kind of it gets muddled, but to have a fundamental understanding of what's going on. So we went through that. Now, during the break, you heard Nancy Pelosi. Very interesting clip, very interesting audio clip about Nancy Pelosi speaking about this.
Yeah, the New World Order.
Right.
What clip we were intending to upload instead of that one was her January 4th, 2007 Speaker of the House inauguration clip, but that was way too long, where she echoed similar sentiments about the New World Order and the destiny of America.
Exactly. Now, folks, if you can consider tonight an extension of yesterday's show, the 2 hours of yesterday's show. Again, we're going to just recap, take a few minutes to recap yesterday and then get into the meat of tonight, because we found ourselves asking whether the United States was designed to generate, get this, to generate the Antichrist. If you want to take a few steps back, was the United States designed to generate or facilitate a new power structure, meaning the New World Order? Think back. We often refer to George Bush talking about George H.W. Bush, his New World Order speech, and you've got Kissinger, you got Brzezinski, you got all of these players talking about this New World Order.
This one?
Isn't that interesting? See, words do mean things. To coin a phrase from Rush Limbaugh, but they do. And statements are made to the uninitiated and the initiated, well, the initiated and the uninitiated alike, but to those hearing those words, on January 20th, 2001, George W. Bush, during his first inaugural address, faced the Washington Monument, which is the obelisk, and twice referred to an angel that rides in the whirlwind. You just heard that, and directs this storm. Do you not think an angel rides in the whirlwind and directs the storm? 5 weeks after that inaugural, on February 28th, 2001, you had Congressman Major R. Owens of New York. Well, he stood before the House and prayed again to the angel in the whirlwind. Now, folks, having veterans of the program, have heard this before, but it's important to reiterate, because Owen asked, he has a spiritual force to guide the future and fate of the United States. Well, 28 weeks later, for a total of 33 weeks from the date of the inauguration. Note that this number, as we talked about yesterday, invaluable to these occult fraternities, secret societies. It was exactly 33 weeks 9/11 happened. Was there some sort of secret wink, wink, nod, nod involved? Perhaps a speech in 4 years later, he offered again this very cryptic commentary, saying that America defended our freedom by standing watch on distant borders, and mentioned that after the shipwreck of communism came years of quiet, years of repose, years of sabbatical. But then he said, by our efforts, we have lit a fire as well, a fire in the minds of men. Now, if you look at the phrase, fire in the minds of men, it's from Dostoevsky's 19th century book, The Possessed, folks, I've said this before. We've gone over this before. This book, Possessed, is about a violent government crackdown on dissent that sparks civil unrest. Now think about that. It references the angel, the whirlwind, and then utters the phrase, or speaks the phrase, "a fire in the minds of men." It's not just a random phrase, but it's a statement of intent, quoting Dostoevsky's 19th century book, The Possessed. And again, The Possessed is about violent government crackdown on dissent that sparks civil unrest. What are we seeing today? I would argue that we're seeing government crackdown on dissent. We're seeing it on the internet. We're seeing it with freedom of speech. We're seeing it in other ways as well. Bush himself tied the inaugural cryptic remarks to the Masonic involvement in the American Revolution, saying, and I'll quote him, "When our founders declared a new order of the ages, they were acting on ancient hope that is meant to be fulfilled." How often do we listen to these or not listen to what these people are saying when they're talking? So, to those on the inside, the secret societies, to the illuminated elite, to a handful of historians and scholars, the inaugural address by Bush were the inaugural addresses by the president. They're important additions in a larger series of very carefully crafted speeches in which, line by line, you can identify public references, uncovering what appears to be what we believe to be, and we're joined by Tom Horn and others who believe to be language designed to convey these mystery messages to members of his global audience, in this case, Bush. Biblical scholar Bruce Lincoln examined the speech delivered by Bush on October 7th, 2001. This is after the 9/11 attacks, when he announced the attack on Afghanistan. Bush, what Lincoln did was he conducted this analysis by way of looking at the Bible, using the Bible as the reference point. Well, Bush announced the attack on Afghanistan repeatedly. He was very redundant. There were hidden references from apocalyptic books of the Bible concerning the end times in his speech, even to the point where this Bruce Lincoln concluded that the speech was a very carefully crafted message, a strategy of double coding to secretly appeal to people who saw Bush as someone divinely called to stand up to the enemies of God in unfolding events in the Middle East, which they believed were foretold in the books of Revelation, Isaiah, and other ancient texts. Now, if you think about that, does that not cause you to think perhaps that by him speaking to the initiated globally, that perhaps this was planned out in advance? There can be no other legitimate or reasonable conclusion. It's an amazing. There's a book out called American Dynasty, in which the author Kevin Phillips talks about the practice of message coding, specifically by Bush, where he points out the ever-present evil ones. You remember that, folks? Now, I'm not picking on George W. Bush. I'm just flat out laying out the facts here. Phillips, at the top of his list, he is a reference, again, to the use of the metaphysical phrase whirlwind. And it's funny, if you go back to the Bush years, the two Bush presidencies, how many times Congress people, and Bush used the phrase or the word that contained the phrase that contained the word whirlwind. and he interprets it as a medium for the voice of God in the books of Job and Ezekiel. So from an esoteric point of view, Phillips is, look, there are meanings that are extremely important to secret societies in the speeches that we were privy to. So when we talk about the Olympics, we talk about the Super Bowl, we cannot and must not forget the words of our elected people, because they are the very ones who are answering to and communicating with the global elite. So what's going on here? Bush certainly was not the first guy, the first president to use specific language to cast himself as a defender of the faith in order to, well, at the very least, to win support for public policy. You've got Reagan, who viewed the Soviet Union as the evil empire, and he even referenced the fact that the Middle East might draw Gog into a nuclear war and fulfill biblical prophecy. Remember the 1984 debate with Walter Mondale? Reagan admitted no one knows whether those prophetic prophecies, meaning prophecies in the Bible, in the context of the Middle East events, he said no one knows whether these prophecies mean that Armageddon is 1,000 years away or the day after tomorrow. George W. Bush, the language of godlike appointment was even described by some as extremely disturbingly deeper, and even the members of his own Methodist denomination saw a dramatic change in Bush after he took office. To them, it was like he was a man on a mission, somebody who believed he was chosen by God to initiate a prophetic master plan. Look at that in the context of the Illuminati. And this is what people have got to look at the bigger picture. And in the 2006 midterms, there were some changes made, but the changes to domestic and foreign policy, the presidency of Bush was really on a path, if you look at this, toward an apocalyptic vision led by inspiration from what? From the angel in the whirlwind. Did Bush understand the ramifications of his words and actions? Did the people around him understand what the ramifications? Did the people around him, the speechwriters, and Bush himself understand the reference or the reference to the Dostoevsky's novel, The Possessed?
Yeah, it's like what you're talking about. Do they understand the importance? The Harbinger, where what was it, John Edwards, and who was the other politician that both read this out of the same verse of the Bible, where it talked about, the sycamores are cut down, or the hewn stones are cut down, but we will replace them with sycamores. Reading these prophetic verses, after 9/11, as these prophetic things are happening, do they actually really even understand what they are doing? Just like the Joe Biden clip, swearing in a Justice Roberts saying, you will rule on whether a person can be microchipped to track his every movement. Pastor Langford said that was prophetic. I wonder, I'm sure the speechwriters know. I'm sure that there is a presence, whether physical or spiritual, which has, instructs them to put physical.
Exactly. So you're talking about perhaps something inspired, spiritually inspired, whether demonically or godly inspired.
And John Kerry, thanks guys, was the second politician who read from the same verse.
Well, remember yesterday we talked about Prometheus. Okay. Look, fire in the minds of men. If you look at that, for members of the family, for members of the initiated, the family of the globalists, well, let me back up to just a second here. The prophetic context for war in the very land associated with Armageddon in the future, and even against Saddam Hussein, no less, who claimed publicly to be the reincarnated Nebuchadnezzar. Think about this now. Here you are the president of of the United States, the most powerful military force in the world, and you are actually opening up a war front against Saddam Hussein, the man who claimed publicly to be the reincarnated Nebuchadnezzar, Nimrod, whatever. That held for Bush the language of moral dualism, which allowed him to play out a divine mission, at least in his mind and in the mind of the globalist, while earning him admiration from, in my case, neocons like me at the time, bonesmen, and frankly, the guardians of the craft. And when I say the craft, I'm talking about witchcraft. I'm talking about demonic craft, the larger sense. For members of the initiated and their associates in secrecy, that the most startling coded language was drafted at a regular cycle. For them, the phrase "fire in the whirlwind" from the second inaugural was not only a call for societal upheaval to usher in a new world order, but once again, and I stress this, a reference to the Promethean faith. And that neoconservatism and Prometheism could be married, that it could be connected is essentially important, as both doctrines, folks, are occult visions of a kingdom of God or gods on earth established through human endeavor and enlightenment. Prometheus was the Greek titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to man. We've got to understand without going too far deep into this, we've got to understand the players here. And we've got to understand the Promethean faith. It's a revolutionary faith. It's a Gnostic doctrine whose origins were solidified in the occult Freemasonry and scientific Marxism. And remember that term, scientific Marxism, because that is important. So, in the view of recent history and how, in the context and how this applies, a fire in the minds of men, plus numerous, at least two, if not more, references to the angel in the whirlwind, were the perfect scripted choices for Bush's inaugurals. This was also key for those who understood it at the time, and that's important to understand. If you're listening to this and you kind of know the code, you know the key, the key words there to unlocking what some have said was really deep politics, below the surface realities that may, for political reasons, be hidden from the radar of us, you and me, while at the same time signaling the appropriate power brokers, the power elite, concerning the real or deep political and spiritual agenda at play. So what I'm saying is, this was a coded speech. I mean, Bush certified confirmation from God for his actions, because remember, in Job 22:13, God speaks once, yea, twice, meaning you say it twice. In occult theology, the number 2, we talked about this, or we referenced gematria and numerology.
Yeah.
Number 2 is the number for dualism.
And when talking about the Freemasons and these secret societies, look no further than some of their own writings and their own publications, where they, mainly P. Hall here writes, every pagan nation not only has its state religion, but they have their own secret societies. And they say it's the ritualism of Freemasonry is based on the trials to which candidates were subject by the ancient ones before the keys of wisdom were entrusted to them. Few realize the extent to which the ancient secret schools influence contemporary intellects through those minds, posterity. It goes on to say that it appears that all the perfection of civilization and all the advancements made in philosophy, science, and art among the ancients are due to those institutions which, under the veil of mystery, sought to illustrate the sublimest truths of religion, morality, and virtue, and impress them upon the hearts of their disciples.
Very interesting. And that's from Manly P. Hall, right? You said?
Yep.
Okay. Well, let's just continue a kind of a larger review, because I think that this is so important for people's understanding, because I had a difficult time. Maybe I'm a slow learner. Maybe I'm just kind of a slow learner in all this. But when you're contemplating Bush's Angel in the Whirlwind, the inaugural references, how this was used to set the stage in the American psyche, our minds, for allegorical cosmic conflict between the forces of good and evil. And think about that. The good United States against the evil spirit of Babylon. That's how it was set up. And you can refer to books, for example, Dr. John Coleman wrote a book titled The Committee of 300, where he claimed inside knowledge concerning world manipulation by an occult Illuminati elite. Well, this falls right into that. The angel in the whirlwind is actually the Mariah conquering wind, which is actually one of the names associated with the Illuminati. The Illuminati, or as it's known by the Committee of 300, Mariah conquering wind. Now, you got to look at the old families of the European black nobility, the American Eastern liberal establishment, and Freemason hierarchy of the Order of the Skull and Bone. Think about George Bush, Skull and Bones, the number 322. The Illuminati, or as it is known by the committee, Mariah conquering wind. In the Committee of 300, which has a 150-year history, you've got some of the most knowledgeable, brilliant minds to form this completely totalitarian, absolutely controlled new society. But it's not new, because it draws its ideas from various ancient sources. The objective, as we know, is a one world government rather than anything else. H.G. Wells, in his work commissioned by the committee, which Wells boldly called The Open Conspiracy Plans for a World Revolution. Think about that. There is the devotion that the occult oligarchs have toward implementing this one world order through emerging uniform codes and laws by which everybody on the planet will be enslaved to the desires of the ruling elite. This is what we're seeing in this UN initiatives, or these UN initiatives. This is the plan under which the UN was made. Remember, the League of United Nations didn't do well, so they replaced it by the United Nations. That's a very simple explanation. But look at the connection between Freemasonry, the Skull and Bones, in which George W. Bush is a member, and the knowledge that the Mariah conquering wind is a title by which occult insiders identify themselves is notable. Mariah, if you want to dissect it real quick, that's an ancient term. Its connection to a divine wind as a vehicle for God and angelic war is important to apocalyptic and mystical literature. Okay, so on the surface, Moriah is the sacred mountain, of course, that we reference, on which Abraham, and you've heard Paul McGuire talk about this and others, on which Abraham nearly sacrificed Isaac before the angel of God called out and said, no, stop. Moriah is also the location of the original Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The politics of the Middle East, the Temple Mount, Jerusalem, it has extreme significance, not only the obvious, but the less obvious. So when you hear people talking about Jerusalem and the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, you've got to look at it through the context in which the Illuminati look at it, the people behind and the power brokers look at it. The foundation stone at the heart of the Dome of the Rock in modern Jerusalem is believed to mark the exact location. Well, it's just very significant. it's extremely significant. And we talked about the occult holidays yesterday. I kind of wanted in the numerology, I kind of wanted to get into that, but we kind of got off on this Mariah conquering wind a little bit, and the symbolism, speeches of.
And we can, talk about what we were getting into last night, but back to the, just the basic Satanism and the occult, how we're seeing it in our society. There are two sets of people, really, people who openly, knowingly practice these things. And then I was reading a book here, one of your books here, Fast Facts on False Teachings, and it addresses horoscopes. And it says, estimates are that at least 50 million Americans are involved in some form of the occult. A recent survey estimated that more than 50 million Americans read horoscopes every morning to see what they should do that day. And it goes on to say people are involved in all types of occult, from fortune-telling, tarot cards, numerology. People also openly involved in witchcraft, Satanism, spiritualism. Other are going New Age channelers, playing the Ouija board, attending seances, communicating with the dead, and even common people. It says, different. When you go to your local grocery store, you see newspapers and magazines with glaring headlines, movies, people who are involved in UFO, clairvoyance, voodoo, all different types of things out there. And we're told about this. We know that what would happen it says in Timothy, now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, speaking lies, hypocrisy, and having their conscience seared with a hot iron. All in Timothy 2:4-3, it says, for a time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust they shall heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. They will turn away from the truth and be turned into fables. There's so many examples in Scripture. And what we're told to do is, it says in 1 Peter 5:8-9, be sober, vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour, whom resisteth steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same afflictions are accompanied in your brethren that are in the world. And, there's so many scriptural references to what we see happening today, and there are so many examples of the evil that is spreading around in this world today.
And that's why, and you said something very important there, I believe. We can talk about the Bohemian Grove and the events that occur there. But what's the real significance of it? It's one thing to say, well, you've got a bunch of powerful people gathering around. It's like a boys' night out at the Boy Scout camp, in a very perverse way. And I mean that in every sense of the word, perverse. To me, and of course, you get people approached who say, well, it's just a guys' club. It's a place to unwind and so on. Well, you've got this occult significance to this. You can talk about the Bohemian Grove, but what really is the Bohemian Grove? When I first learned of it via Alex Jones, for example, he had this marvelous expose of the Bohemian Grove. But I didn't understand how it related to really anything outside of maybe it gave people the ability to talk in private and make plans. Well, it's much more than that. If you consider, for example, the texts of some of the classic texts by some members of Christianity, when I say that, I'm talking about how many of us have heard about the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Enoch, and have heard references to those two books, and people say, well, those are outside the canon of the Bible, so we don't really, that's not part of the Bible. Well, for historical reference, it's important, but you know what else? It's more than that. It's important to those people of the occult mindset and who are part of the Illuminati, because there's the texts actually identify, for example, a specific god known as Metatron, the most powerful angel called Metatron. Now, you might think that this is so far out there mentally, and so far off why are you even talking about this? Well, think about this. here you're a leader, and you're attending Bohemian Grove, the most powerful of all angels, according to these non-canonical works in Jubilees and Enoch, is Metatron, one of the big-time angels. Now, for Illuminati people, for Illuminists, the third book of Enoch is among the most important of the mystical literature, as it offers the story of the genesis of Metatron by claiming that Enoch himself is the one who ascends into heaven to be transformed into Metatron. Now, you can read that in the third book of Enoch. I won't get into that here, but it's the story of Metatron is interesting and relevant because as Metatron, Enoch becomes, are you ready for this, the angel in the whirlwind and master over other angels in the whirlwind, including all the angels. But because Enoch and as Metatron can control all other angels, good and evil, he earns this special position as a critical figure in Freemasonry, as well as being heavily identified with ritual magic in the Kabbalah through his association with or transformation into Metatron. You've got to understand how these people think and how it's the
right.
actions of these people.
And so many of the like this, I've been talking about this book I got by George McGee, International Community, A Goal for a New World Order. To a lot of these people that talk about the New World Order in this book is very similar in its teachings or philosophies to many of these occultic publications that we've been referencing, whether it's Crowley or Blavatsky or Manly P. Hall. The phrases they use, terminology, the ideas, they're all the same.
Precisely. But, okay, for example, and we'll take this to current relevance here. Think of it this way. The extra biblical legend concerning Enoch's transformation into Metatron and the angel's connection with the rest, or with the testing of Abraham with respect to his son Isaac and on Mount Moriah, they're deeply encoded within several of the occult rituals. Now, this is where we come to the Bohemian Grove. Remember, I don't know how many years ago was it, when Jones and a filmmaker, they secreted into the Bohemian Grove. And for those who don't know, Bohemian Grove is a campsite, for lack of a better term, somewhere about, 30 or 40 miles to the west of Santa Rosa, California. And Jones and the filmmaker recorded, and you can find this on YouTube, what is known as the cremation of care ceremony. Well, if you look at it, it's kind of like a Stanley Kubrick film, hooded figures. And these are some of the most powerful world leaders, the most wealthiest, the most powerful men, including, U.S. presidents, George H.W. Bush, Cheney, and other wealthy, powerful men. They're all gathered beneath a 40-foot-tall stone owl surrounded by water. Now, what happens? Well, a child or effigy thereof, dubbed Dull Care, was delivered by a ferryman on a boat, placed on the altar, right at the foot of the owl, where it was burned as an offering for the purpose of magically alleviating the cares and concerns of those elitists making the sacrifice. Let me ask you, folks, who in their right mind does this? Seriously. At what point in your life do you have to get enjoyment, or must you attend a ceremony where a child is brought on a boat and burned in effigy at the foot of a 40-foot owl? What are you thinking? What are you thinking at that point? I mean, I've been to some parties in the 70s, but I got to tell you.
Let me tell you this from Aleister Crowley's book here. It talks about sacrificing rituals, having rituals of sacrifice. And I'm got to find the page again. But it actually talks about human sacrificing. It talks about what is ideal when performing these rituals. And I want to read a direct quote from this book, which is very sick. And
okay, be prepared. By the way, this also, folks, think about the Franklin cover-up. I'm mentioning this again, the Franklin cover-up. You want to know relevance? You want to know what's going on? The Franklin cover-up, the missing, the satanic ritual abuse of children. This happened in Omaha, and has been well documented by Senator John DeCamp, and we will have him on our show to talk about the Franklin cover-up. But if you don't, folks, this is real. This is absolutely real. Go ahead, Joe.
I'm looking for the quote here. Hold on.
Okay. But see, this is relevant. You've got some pretty sick puppies out there doing this.
And while I'm looking for this quote, but it basically says is in the ritual that you are going to sacrifice a child, preferably a male of intelligence.
And this is going to segue nice into
the sacrifice oneself. The sacrifice of oneself spiritually. Okay, here we go. A male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence. It is the highest spiritual working. One must accordingly choose the victim which contains the greatest and purest force. A male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence.
The smarter, the more intelligent, the better. Oh, the gods will be pleased, and that's correct. And this is going to segue into the Maypole celebration, the relevance of which, the time coming, in short order, is the Beltane and Maypole. And folks, this will happen on a global scale, and truly, I believe we're going to. Look, if I had to guess, or if I had to, in the scheme of things, was the school shooting in Newtown, was that a ultimately a child sacrifice? Could that have been a sacrifice to the occult gods? And you think, well, this one sick, twisted kid did this. Well, okay, somebody's got to do it.
That quote was from Crowley's book Magic, spelled with a K, in Theory and Practice, page 74.
Okay, going back to the Bohemian Grove. In fact, I'll quote Jones from his website real quick here. He said that it was something like out of a Hollywood movie where kids are out camping in the wilderness and come over a hill and witness some devil cult in black and red garb sacrificing some poor soul on a bloody altar. That is written by Jones, about the similarity between the cremation of care and, the ancient Canaanite worship of the owl god Molech, where children were sacrificed for nearly identical reasons. Now, we've got to understand, scholars have debated whether the child sacrifice made to Moloch were burned alive or slain elsewhere and then drained of blood and offered as food to the deity, this false god. It's important, ladies and gentlemen, to really understand this, the depth, the depravity of the people. We're seeing these secret societies infiltrate highest levels of power, like the Bohemian ritual, these ancient gods, Baal, Moloch, Cronus.
This
Go ahead.
is something I'm learning as I'm learning more about this evil influence, or the satanic influence. It's not that it's taking over the leadership. It's already, it always has been in control of the leadership. And it's been passed down from generation to generation. Well,
exactly. That brings me to the question. Was the United States set up to generate the Antichrist or be part of this end times period? You played Nancy Pelosi, that clip. Now, when when U.S. Representative Nancy Pelosi assumed her role as Speaker of the House on January 4th of 2007, at the opening of the 110th Congress, isn't it interesting that she followed the pattern by George Bush and even George H.W. Bush? by speaking a very loaded statement concerning the founding fathers. You heard it, we played it, that they were so confident in the America that they were advancing, they put on the seal, the Great Seal of the United States, a new order for the centuries. Now, you heard it right from the lips of Pelosi, in which we played. Now, she didn't go into detail why she considered the phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum important.
But we do have Bush, the
right?
Bush clips, which go into more detail. If you
in there, you see, they're telling us what they are doing, what they have done, and what their intentions are for the future. And as early, well, as recent as 2007, and even Kissinger, Obama, and others since then are telling us what they're doing, what they're going to do. Now here's where, to me, and folks, if you feel lost in this, I understand. I mean, I get it. Because it's very difficult to really wrap your mind around the enormity of the lie, the enormity of this conspiracy. In fact, my wife had said to me today, "Oh, I don't believe in the larger conspiracy." And look, I appreciate, I understand that, and I understand why a person would say that, and I'm sure you do too, because I'm sure you get that all the time from your family. But see, when you have people like Pelosi saying this stuff, for example, Pelosi did not add why this expression exists beneath the unfinished pyramid, for example, in the all-seeing eye, the eye of Horus. What that eye is on the back of the dollar bill or on the seal is the eye of Horus, or the eye of Osiris, or the eye of Apollo. Pick one. They're all the same in the Great Seal. Her allusion, however, to it was not coincidental. The origins of the motto and the importance behind the increase in references of today. There are so many references to this cryptic passage by government insiders today. The reason behind it, folks, Joe and I are telling you, the reasons behind it will become evident soon enough. We're seeing it take place right now. We had talked about the United States being founded upon by Masons, and the how Masons affected the founding of our country. And I'm sure you know Masons. In fact, that I had received an email from a Mason who said, "Look, I didn't know any of this stuff." Well, Masons, who are a lot of them, the bulk of them, are intentionally kept in the dark by their superiors. It's just that way. It's only there's a club that exists, but if you're not part of that number one club, or the top of the pyramid, shall we say, you don't know the real truth. In fact, the truth, as a friend of mine likes to say, is different at every level. Consider that in Freemasonry.
Right, and the truth you're talking about is the satanic deception. It's not truth at all, but it is regarded as truth and sacred wisdom and knowledge, and the people have been deceived into believing a lie, as the scriptures say.
Right. Now, was the United States, I'll ask it, we can look at current events to see if this is true. Was it, or at least was it originally planned to be, the kind of utopia formed by the Masons or Rosicrucians, for example? This Rosicrucian, this Masonic Brotherhood, was involved in the American and French as well as European revolutions. You can't dispute that. That's fact. And if you look at the signers of the Declaration of Independence, at least 44, though perhaps a lower number of the 56 signers, were Freemasons. Numerous U.S. presidents were also part of the craft, including Washington. You got Jackson, Monroe, Polk, Buchanan. I mean, my goodness, the list goes on. Truman, Johnson, Ford, so on and so forth. But curiously, was the Order of Freemasons did the Order, I should say, of Freemasonry engineer the U.S. city named after America's first president, Washington?
Yes, I would say yes.
Okay.
And
was there an occult design behind it?
Yes.
Okay. Why? What was it?
It goes.
Why?
Remember what Paul McGuire says about Plato, Plato philosophy. This is what it stems back to, and as to why, I don't know, but or I should say, I don't know. I don't.
Did you know that the Capitol building, and I didn't know this, but doing research on this, the Capitol building was astrologically aligned, or is astrologically aligned with the constellation Virgo, which is Isis.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
You know, the Freemasons, you know, they say the Illuminati started in 1776. Either way, as I said, these are ancient. As I'm still learning these things here, these are ancient ideas carried out from generation to generation, from the garden to now. And even like one of the chapters here in this Manly P. Hall book is the secret, the Ancient League of Nations, where it talks about the Plato
Ancient League of Nations,
right.
not the World War I League of Nations.
Exactly, and it describes a golden age. And you know, we always harp on how politicians constantly say the word democracy and they don't say republic. Well, that was the goal of Plato, was to erect a perfect utopian democracy,
which I suppose is an esoteric belief system of Freemasonry.
Right.
Okay. And it's interesting because, you know, many will argue. For example, Paul McGuire says there's no spiritual or scriptural reference to America being Babylon, or the daughter of Babylon, New Babylon. And of course, we can agree to disagree, Paul and I, because others, Steve Quayle and others, John Price, for example, says that we are Babylon, and there's evidence to support that.
Yeah, and I've done a lot of research on this, and I've tried to figure this out myself, and I went from idea to idea, and you know, from Babylon to Mystery Babylon. Could Mystery Babylon be this mysterious religious system, such as Freemasonry, such as a twisted version of Christianity that churches from Catholicism to Lutheran to, different denominations have picked up different elements of? Well, in this huge book I don't understand, The Harvest of Hellenism, it talks about how the Council of Nicaea and Constantine turning to Christian was the greatest thing that ever happened for Hellenism, and how it allowed them to intertwine themselves with every type of, with all the Christian doctrines. They've twisted and perverted interpretations. And see, this is why it's so important that everybody reads the Bible and prays for interpretations for themselves.
Right.
Because if you listen to other people, you can hear 95% truth and 5% of a satanic element, even in a sermon.
Isn't exactly, and that's critical to understand when you are. And I don't believe that many of these sermons in a church environment are done with the intent to deceive, but I think it's done from a position of ignorance from the real truth. However,
exactly, and that's due to the lack of study, dedication, and prayer, and the motivation to strive to learn what God wants for us.
And see, Joe, I believe that is going to usher in this ability for people to be deceived. The ultimate deception. We talked about this with Stan Dale, about the ultimate deception. And if you know, I suppose if you're deeply rooted not only in the Bible, which is the most important reference, but if you also know the backstory which we're giving you, then you will more easily discern the deception. Now, maybe we're asking the wrong question here about America. Is it New Babylon, or perhaps is it something else, like the New Atlantis?
Well, reading these books, this Manly P. Hall book, they talk about this secret destiny for America, and it says the world democracy was the secret dream of the great classical philosophers. Thousands of years before Columbus, they were aware of the existence of the Western Hemisphere and selected it to be the site of the philosophic empire. The brilliant plan of the ancients has survived to our time and will continue to function until the great work is accomplished. The American nation has its vision of its own, or needs a vision of its own purpose, and it says it will be possible to build an enduring peace. It will not be possible to build an enduring peace until the average man has been convinced that personal selfishness is detrimental to personal happiness and personal success, showing that there's a much larger concept out there. And it goes on to say that this has been since ancient times. The greatest known problems is the human problem.
Right. Exactly.
It goes right back to the Tower of Babel and the ideas they had there. The one mind.
Well, correct. It's the New World Order, but it's the Old World Order today. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. It's just the revamping of the Old World Order into the New World Order. I know we're up against it time-wise, but I think it's important to really get into just one thing. I just want to say this. When you go to Washington, D.C., for example, you can pay for a guide who will take you to visit locations you can get a Masonic guide, actually. It will take you to the George Washington Masonic National Memorial, the House of the Temple, the headquarters building of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, name it. Now, designed in 1911, note the connection, by the way, again, between Masons and the numerological value of 9/11. I think it's important to point that out when we're talking about symbology. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say, to all this occultism and Satanism we are addressing, the scriptures clearly point out, in 2 Peter 2, it says, "But there are false prophets also among the people, even as there shall be false teachers among you, who privily shall bring in damnable heresies, even denying the Lord that brought them, and bringing upon themselves swift destruction. And many shall follow their perilous ways, by reason of whom the way of the truth shall be evil spoken of. And of covetousness shall they be feigned words made merchandise of you, whose judgment now for a long time lingereth, and their damnation slumbereth not, if God did not spare the angels." And it goes on from there. It says, "But these are natural brute beasts. They've been made to take in and destroy, speak evil of things that they do not understand." And it goes on talking about how these tentacles of Satanism infest society, infest believers, and how easy it is if we don't test the spirits, if we do not stand up and maintain our spiritual health, if we do not walk in the Spirit, we will be entangled through these diverse lusts of darkness that have been put out by these doctrines of devils.
Well, speaking of doctrines of devils, today's Masons, for example, they could very well or might admit to involvement by their ancestors toward establishing the foundation of a utopian New World Order, at least those at the higher levels. In Washington, D.C., for example, think of it this way. Look at Washington, D.C. There are scholars who've looked at the layout, much smarter than you and I, Joe, and much more intelligent. They've said that the buildings, the government buildings, the Masonic monuments, were meant for what some contend to be an electric-type grid that pulsates, and I quote this from one scholar, David Bay, that pulsates, quote, with luciferic power 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, the government, for example, if you look at the government's own records, they state clearly that the capital city's design was shepherded by those who wanted it to reflect some sort of dedication to pagan gods. This is admitted, actually, which I found astounding. If you look at the article, this is written some time ago, the most approved plan, the competition for the capital's design. Now, you can find that on the Library of Congress's website. And I'll repeat that again. The most approved plan, the competition for the capital's design. Well, that tells, after advertising a competition for the design of the government center, that Washington, Jefferson, and the commissioners of the District of Columbia were disappointed by the entries and designed the city based on the Roman pantheon. Now, a circular, domed rotunda dedicated to what? The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? No, the God dedicated to all pagan gods, actually.
Right, and we're taught in Scripture about this. It's so clear. It says, "For we have not followed cunningly devised fables when we've made known unto you the power of the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but were eyewitnesses of his majesty." It goes on to say, "The prophecy came not in old time by the will of man, but holy men of God spake as they were moved by the Holy Ghost."
Right. Folks, we're up against it. We're going to take a break here. In fact, we'll take some of your calls after we get back.
Before we jump into the break here, Ferret Kisses in the chat room said that they wanted us to give a shout out to their two hamsters, Doug and Joe, that they named after us. So,
well, I'll tell you, we you know what, we have arrived. Seriously, really, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
God bless the two little guys, or hopefully they're guys, right?
I don't know, but
how do you tell?
I don't know, but I think that's funny and that's
great.
Interesting. But
well, just take good care of Doug and Joe. Let them.
And I hope the hamsters were in earshot of that.
Of course, I gotta tell you, I feel like on that wheel, being put on the wheel. Folks, you're listening to this very special edition, the 13th day of February 2014.
To the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Thursday, February 13th, 2014. We're going to be taking your calls this hour at 661-244-9839. That's 661-244-9839. Two pieces of news we're going to hit, and then we're going to your calls. First, this article from yesterday. Christian programming is being blocked from your TV lineup. It is difficult to flip through channels on cable or even network television anymore without stumbling upon vile language, graphic sexuality, and shocking acts of violence. With the entertainment market so splintered among the niche networks, there is no shortage of virtually any type of programming. For those paying attention to our nation's protracted slide into secularism, however, it may come as no surprise that there is one notable exception: religious content. There are few faith-based options among most content providers, and as recent reports indicate, at least one company is thinking its offerings even further. Is thinning its offerings even further. DirecTV recently announced it will drop the Inspiration Network from its lineup, leaving its stable and profane worldly channels untouched. Incredibly, reports indicate that provider also misrepresented the development by suggesting that the network initiated the split. In reality, it appears the decision was wholly that of the provider. Most baffling aspect of the decision lies in the fact that DirecTV did not gain anything or save any money by dropping the network. And it goes on to talk about how the nastiness we see on TV is being, it's so perverse and it's so in your face and it's on every channel. And at the same time, so few shows, let alone stations, promote anything of the Lord, the ones that are being taken off.
It's interesting because there is a fight to take off Christian programming, yet they'll put on Islamic programming and Islam. And I say this all the time, but if you look at the websites that are critical of Islam, they're correct, but they don't go far enough. Islam is a tool of the globalists. And I used to be the biggest opponent, or biggest opponent of the militant Islamic agenda, and I still am. But you got to look at the bigger picture, because as we've seen in World War I and World War II and all conflicts, there is this cabal of bankers, and it all comes back down to the money, which is why you're seeing the bankers' deaths, because they have the ability to be witnesses or to expose the agenda behind this. But looking at all conflicts, the bankers, the power brokers, the power elite have funded all sides of all conflicts. So it's like saying, and I heard Alex Jones say, who was the winner in the Super Bowl? Well, it's the owners. Same difference, same thing. Who wins? Who are the winners of global conflict or regional conflict? It's the people who finance them. You got people financing both sides. Because the House always wins. Trust me, the House always wins. We're going to play a clip, and thanks to Ricky R. for pointing this out. I had forgotten about this. You want insight into the larger agenda that includes the Affordable Care Act, and it also has a tie to what we're talking about here, and I think it will become evident. This is Hillary Clinton. This is about Hillary Clinton. This is a CNN news clip that references her diary entries.
CNN has been going through the notes, the papers, the diary entries of Diane Blair. She's a former political science professor, a Clinton friend who died back in 2000. Documents have been made available now, and our national political reporter, Peter Hamby, is here. You and a team, you've been going through a lot of these documents right now. The first issue, Revenge. What is that all about?
Yeah, we actually had two producers go down to Fayetteville to the University of Arkansas to go through these boxes and boxes and boxes of notes and files that Diane Blair left. And it's really intriguing. There's not a lot of hard news in here, but it's a really intimate glimpse into her thinking during the Clinton White House years. One thing jumped out at us in 1994, in June 1994, Hillary Clinton told Diane Blair at the height of the health care battles, I want to record what's going on here for posterity. And Diane Blair said, why? And this is what Clinton said. This is filtered through Diane Blair, of course. When I first asked what for, she said, quote, revenge. Later, telling our side, later, after more talks, just brain dumps, just to get it down while still fresh. That notion of revenge will certainly strike a lot of Clinton's enemies as, an aha moment. This is her vindictive side in the White House. But you covered the Clinton White House, that period. It was, full of paranoia and leaks and a lot of media hatred coming from inside the Clinton White House. But that was just one of the most interesting things that's jumped out to us so far.
Yeah, and I know that she also, according to these papers that have recently been discovered and people have been going through, she wanted to preserve a detailed record of her husband's administration, 8 years as president of the United States. But she was also concerned about keeping too many documents because of potential subpoenas out there.
Yeah, that's right. She, if you read through these notes, you really see her concern and anxiety about perceived enemies, the media. She was afraid of subpoenas, as you mentioned, and just really wanted to get down her side of the story just to protect herself in the long run. Again, this is in 1994, 1995, really a low point for the Clinton White House. So we're kind of getting a glimpse into what she was thinking at that specific moment. Of course, as you go later in the documents into 1997, 1998, we get into the Lewinsky scandal, but you also start to see some of the brighter sides of the Clinton White House, too.
I remember in those days covering the White House, a lot of those officials, they didn't want to write anything down because of Whitewater investigations, Lewinsky
investigations. Lots of
gates. Yeah, there were a lot of stuff going on. Now, we know she was the First Lady of Arkansas, but at the same time, she was a high-powered lawyer in Little Rock at the Rose Law Firm. She went on to become First Lady of the United States, a United States Senator from New York, Secretary of State. So what's all this information about that she really wanted to be a kindergarten teacher?
Right. That was really intriguing. In the same period, in June 1994, again, really a low point, she told Diane Blair, when this is all over, I want to go be a kindergarten teacher.
Yeah. Well, why the revenge? Why the anger? Why the animosity? It's almost a pathological anger. But why? What's behind it? What fueled it? If you go back in time, go back in history, remember that Hillary Clinton was championing the reformation of the health care system here in the United States. Well, a lot of this animosity was the fact that she was unable to push that agenda through. What is the Affordable Health Care Act? What really is that intended upon doing? Well, what's the real intent of that? Aside from ruining 1/6 of our economy, which is already done, and push the transhumanist agenda by way of the architecture for the one world order, mark of the beast system. That's exactly what this is all about. This is exactly what we're talking about here.
And
go ahead.
A great Bible quote here that gets into these secret societies, and is in Isaiah 46. It says in 46:8, it says, "Remember this, and shew yourselves men. Bring it again to mind, O ye transgressors. Remember the former things of old. For I am God, and there is none else. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, My counsel shall stand, and I will do my pleasure. Calling a ravenous bird from the east, that man that executeth my counsel from a far country. I have spoken it, and I will also bring it to pass. I have proposed it, I will also do it. Hearken unto me, ye stout-hearted, that are far from righteousness. I bring near my righteousness, it shall not be far off, and my salvation shall not tarry. I shall place my salvation in Zion and Israel for my glory."
Oh, okay. Yeah. What I want to bring up with Hillary Clinton as well as everyone else, and it seems like these programs, when we talk about this subject matter, we try to do so very carefully and very methodically and very slowly, because I'm a slow learner sometimes, and it takes me a while to wrap my brain around the enormity of the lie. But folks, homework assignment, I suppose, for the listeners of our show, consider that Hillary Clinton, go back and look at some of her YouTube appearances, in particular Benghazi, when she wore that green garb during her "what difference does it make" outburst. Now, consider that all of these power elite, the only way that you can, this is not Mr. Smith Goes to Washington anymore. This is not, hey, Dad, when I grow up, I want to be the president. This is not that type of, well, perhaps it might still be, but there is a price to pay, or at least a society or secret cabal that you've got to agree to be a part of in order to be a part of the power elite, from president to secretary of state and all of the visible power brokers, the puppets that are controlled by the string pullers. But here's the deal, and I submit this to you for your review. I believe that when you analyze, for example, the appearances by Obama, by Clinton, the former, when she was Secretary of State, and even as First Lady, and Bill Clinton, all of these people, look at the certain signs which would indicate some sort of, not only their words indicating or providing some sort of direct communication with others. For example, we spend a lot of time on the angel of the whirlwind, which I think is extremely important to where we're at today. But not only listen to the words, but look at their dress, look at what they're wearing, look at jewelry-wise, look at the position of their hands, the movement of their hands. Look at the different ways they stand, where they stand, with whom they stand. And you might think this is total overkill. You might think, man, he lost it. No, I don't think I have, because you see, we've talked yesterday about these pagan ritualistic holidays and holy days. We talked about numerology. Let me give you an example. Just one
Unholy
example.
days.
Yeah, right. Well, holy to them. Let me give you an example. The Benghazi report. How many pages long was it? It was 39, which is 3/13. Well, 39, what's half of 39? 19.5. What do you think might have been? It's almost like an insider communication, an insider joke. Yeah, this report is important, but it's important. The importance lies, we'll say, halfway down page 19. That's the message to the initiated. A report today was just released about, what the heck was it? It was a 39-page report today. And I want to thank W for sending it to me, and I just can't find it. But again, the length, 39 pages. Are these? I know I probably sound like a madman out there, right? But at some point in time, you've got to look at these things and say, wait, is there communication? Are they communicating with others in numbers, in words, in deeds, in appearances, in the way they hold their hands, in their gestures, in their jewelry, in whatever? Is there communication going on to those on the inside? I contend this is very worthy of looking at. And I contend that this also falls into the area of the reporting, the documents that are reported. Look, if they put symbols on a dollar bill, isn't it natural, perhaps, for them to put to create reports and to create documents that have a certain symbology to it? I mean, look at the unfinished pyramid beneath the all-seeing eye. When you add where the numerology and astrological signs related to the all-seeing eye, add to why certain symbolism on the Great Seal was important to Freemasonry. It's the unfinished pyramid upon the seal's reverse side that Manly Hall called the trestle board that set forth symbolically the task to the accomplishment of which the United States government was dedicated from the day of its inception. So if...
Even from before, 150 years before the Declaration of Independence was signed, it goes on to say in his book.
So what do we got Nancy Pelosi talking about this? That's got to mean something, right? Nancy Pelosi talking about this. That this is in antiquity or a long time ago, but yet it's made current by Nancy Pelosi. What in the world, out of her speech, in the context in which she was referring to this, it doesn't make any sense except through the prism of this secret societies. And this should put these people say, well, you know, what kind of man adult would go to a Bohemian Grove ritual and this is just for them to chill out, relax, and to kind of have some brotherly companionship or whatever you want to call it. What was it, David, the guy from I can't remember when he was interviewed by Alex Jones, or they attempted to interview him, and
David Gergen.
Yeah, and he was offended, of course, but he just tried to blow it off. The point I'm trying to make is, no, there is
a funny interview.
Yeah, there is a significance, a spiritual meaning to these people, and which is reflective of the great architect of the universe as identified in Freemasonry and the grand plan of the universe. So what we're seeing here, the lie is so enormous. Again, the lie is so enormous that we're not. I mean, it's like looking at an elephant from 2 inches away. What do you see? You see, I don't know. You see ugly, or this wrinkled up gray stuff. Well, if you're asked to describe it, what do you see? Well, you're gonna say what you see. But if a person's standing 2 feet away or 10 feet away, they're going to see different things. That's the whole idea behind this, and this is active right now. And I dare say that with respect to the current events, as it appears, or as they appear with Syria and the geopolitics of the Middle East, well, okay, the Olympics, Sochi. The North American ring, and you've heard this, folks, did not light up or lit up improperly. Remember that at Sochi? The ring that signifies North America? Did you hear that, Joe? Did we talk about that? I can't remember.
No, I don't remember that.
Yeah. At the opening ceremonies of the Olympics at Sochi in Russia, the ring signifying or for North America did not light up. Coincidence? Or is there some kind of message behind that? Can all this stuff be coincidence?
Absolutely not. I mean, absolutely not.
Okay. All right.
So let's go to some calls. If you want to join in, 661-244-9839 is the number. We got.
This is your chance to
25 minutes left.
Tell us how crazy we are.
Yeah, we're going to get through as many of these calls as possible, so let's try to be quick. And we're going to start with area code 315. We're coming to you first, area code 315. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Hey, am I on?
You are live. Yes.
Hello? Yeah, hey, how's it going? I was listening to what you guys are saying about what you thought about Mystery Babylon and what the meaning of it is. Is it a nation or is it a religion or an idea? And I think I've got some absolutely great verses you guys are probably going to tear apart when you read these. It's amazing. How about Ezekiel 8? And most about Ezekiel 8, it's talking about Christmas and what an abomination Christmas is, because what people don't know is Tammuz is the god that was born on December 24th at midnight, and he was birthed on December 25th. And that's what that's talking about. So when you read that, but that's not where I was trying to go with it, but you guys should read Ezekiel 8, the whole thing. But at the end of it, the Bible does talk about Freemasonry specifically, because you guys know if you ask a Mason, like if you were to meet one and you say, are you a traveler? And they would respond, yes, I'm traveling from the west to the east. Because the sun rises in the east, and who is represented by the sun? Lucifer.
Oh, the sun god.
Well, here it is. So watch this. Ezekiel 8, verse 16. And he cast me to enter into the inner court of the Lord's house, and behold, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 5 and 20 men, and their backs toward the temple of the Lord. And here's the great part. This shows right here. And the faces toward the east, and they worshiped the sun toward the east. He's talking about Freemasonry. That's what people have to realize. This is our enemy. That's who we're fighting against right now. When I read that, my mouth just dropped. My brain was about to explode when I saw that. It was just unbelievable. Yeah. Then there's another verse. What's that?
No, I was just going to say, if you go back to our Christmas broadcast on Christmas Day, or Christmas Day, we did a show, actually, and that was one of the parts that we incorporated into the show. And you're right, it talks about the sun worshiping, it talks about, Tammuz and how these people, it talks about Ezekiel being put in different directions, first to the west and the north and the east, and seeing one abomination that was worse than the other right after, in sequence.
Well, there's another great verse, too, and it actually names... Now, you guys know the symbols of the Masons, the main symbol, the compass, the square, and there's also the trowel, too. Now, those are tools of what craft? What guys would use that? Use those tools?
The masonry.
Mason, a carpenter, somebody that uses those tools. Well, the Bible says right here in Zechariah 1... it's verses 18 through 21, but I'll just go. It talks about the 4 horns that broke up Judah. But what it says is after that, then it says here in verse 20, and the Lord showed me 4 carpenters. And in that it talks about how they're going to bring the Israel back. And I'll have to go to the Tanakh. If you ever heard of the Hebrew Tanakh, it's the Old Testament. But in theirs, they have a better way of breaking it down. And in there it says... So no man could raise his head, and these men have come to throw them into panic, to hew down the horns of the nation. But it's talking about order out of chaos. it says right there that the 4 carpenters will bring about order out of chaos. Now, these 4 carpenters, what I believe, and actually Bill Cooper talked about this in one of his series, and he said that there were 4 major revolutions. There was the English Revolution in 1688. There was the American Revolution in 1776. There was the French Revolution, which I think was after the American Revolution, was 1789, but I might be wrong about that, and then the Russian Revolution. And out of all 4 of those, Israel was birthed, because out of Great Britain, they created Israel. They helped to create Israel. They controlled that land. Russia, the Jews came from Russia and went into Israel. France, they had something to do with it, but I don't really remember what he said about that. But then who protects Israel right now today? America. And that's what people have to understand. Freemasonry is the end-time beast that God is talking about. When it says the pale horse of Revelation comes riding, and death is riding behind her, what do the Masons do? It's a blood oath of death, and that's who he's talking about. The pale horse of Revelation is probably Mystery Babylon, Freemasonry.
Okay, I'm with you to the point where Mystery Babylon, Freemasonry, I believe, would be one infrastructure. One part of the infrastructure, because we're looking at secret societies as a whole.
I mean, you have different names for different societies, but it all equals Satanism, and under that, yes, absolutely.
You know how,
the Satanist religion.
It says that the mother of all harlots, I believe, too, he talked about this, York Rite Freemasonry believes that all paths lead to God. Basically, all of the secret societies that have branched off came from Freemasonry, which Freemasonry is basically the guardian of Mystery Babylon religion. And all of the New Age has come from York Rite Freemasonry. If you guys ever heard of the OTO? It's called the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis. All of your listeners should look up that site. It's a secret society site. It's actually one of the highest degrees of Freemasonry, but they say they're not a part of it anymore, but they were birthed from it. There's a podcast on there. It's called Thelema Now. There's a whole bunch of podcasts you can get from there. These people actually practice magic, and they admit how they are actually manipulating us through magic, and they admit everything, all of their rituals, and they talk about it like it's a good thing. You guys should really check that out some now. Thelema Now. It's from the OTO. It'll blow you away. What's that?
We'll do that. Very good. Very well articulated. Very well said. We will check that out without fail. I mean, without a doubt, we'll do that. Appreciate that. Very, very articulate. Very nice.
Yeah, thanks for your call.
All right, thanks a lot.
Have a great night. We're going to keep hitting these calls here. 406, we're going to come to you next. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Yes, Doug and Joe, God bless you.
God bless you, too.
I just wanted to keep in perspective as we talk about the plans of the evildoers and we talk about the plans of the devil, to bring into remembrance that his plan is a bloody failure. And at the very end, in the 20th chapter of Revelation, 10th verse, it says, the devil that deceived them was cast into a lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. And while we hear the plans of the wicked, to bring into remembrance that the men that planned the destruction of Daniel were eaten by the lions that didn't get him. Haman ended up hanging on his own gallows in the book of Esther. The men that built the fire for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego ended up dying doing it. And all through the Scripture, there's a reference that you see all through it. Behold, the day cometh, when God himself rises up, and he has the last word in this matter. And we need to be in perspective that the devil, all of his plans, it says in Psalm 2, God laughs at them. That when men make plans against the righteous, in Psalm 37, he says, evildoers shall be cut off, but they that wait on the Lord shall inherit the earth. For yet a little while, and the wicked shall not be, yea, you shall diligently consider his place, but it shall not be. But the meek shall inherit the earth, and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. And it says, for the wicked plot against the just, and gnasheth upon him with his teeth, but the Lord shall laugh at him. For
Right,
he seeth that his day is coming.
Right, we get that, But for perspective purposes, I don't mean to sound short, but for perspective purposes, what we're doing here is there will be many deceived because of false doctrine and for the lack of the knowledge of what's going on. If you know the playbook of the enemy, you've got a better chance of not being deceived. We know how the story ends. We know how this ends. We are talking from a position of victory. However, what about the people who don't understand what's going on? We've got to appeal to those people and say, look, you've got to understand the level of deception. So from that perspective, yes, we do know how the story ends, but we've got to understand at least the basic mechanics, hopefully, so we can save others from falling into that grand deception.
I agree with you. I really respect what you guys are doing. I listen to your show continually, and I just want you to know that with all of the Christians in this time, just to keep perspective, because it's going to be a maddening situation. The earth is going to go crazy, and the Lord speaks of it, prophesies of it. But if we don't have eternal perspective, we will have the same fear that grips the world, grip us. And so all I was really addressing was the saints of God to keep perspective that, you know, the day cometh that shall burn like an oven, and all of the proud and all that do wickedly will be like stubble in that day, and the day that cometh shall burn them up. And I always am amazed when Hezekiah, one angel goes out as he humbles himself before the Lord and kills 185,000 Assyrians that were surrounding Jerusalem. And that, you know, as Elisha said, more are they that are for us than they that are against us. And the whole question with all of us Christians is, are we going to be overcomers in this great time of darkness? Will we keep faith when there's a falling away? Will we walk with God and enter into the supernatural sustenance of Christ? And that's all I want to encourage is, because I know in this hour, if I just look at the giants, I can be overwhelmed. But I look at the God who humbles himself to look at the heavens and the earth and stretches forth the heavens like a curtain. And I would like to share one last little verse here out of, I think it's Jeremiah 25, but he says this, for I will call for a sword upon all the inhabitants of the earth, saith the Lord of hosts. And it says, for the Lord shall roar from on high, and utter his voice from his holy habitation. Yea, he shall mightily roar upon his habitation, and shout as he that treadeth the grapes. It says, for a noise shall go forth to the ends of the earth, for the Lord has a controversy with the nations, and he will plead with all flesh, and give them that are wicked to the sword. And it says, for evil shall go forth from nation to nation. And it says, and a great whirlwind shall be raised up from the coasts of the earth, and the slain of the Lord shall be in that day from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth, and they shall not be lamented, neither gathered nor buried, but shall be as dung on the face of the ground. There comes a day when God rises up, and it's going to be an awesome day, and it's the day.
Amen.
And some men are going to rejoice in that day, and some men are going to be trembling and hiding in the rocks.
Right on.
Absolutely. We're going to let you go and get some other
Thank
callers.
you.
God bless you. Thanks for the call.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay, bye.
All right. 563. 563, we're coming to you now. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Yeah, hi, gentlemen. Great show, as always. I'm a policeman, and I'm just kind of calling in. First of all, on the whole topic of numerology, kind of getting a little synchronicity here. The other day I picked up a book, and oddly for the last 2 days now you're speaking about it. The book is called Numerology and the Divine Triangle, and I've been kind of picking it apart. And, Joe, you had asked earlier what Plato has to do with a lot of the things that they're speaking about these days. And Plato is the reason why we know about most of numerology today as we know it, because he was a student of Pythagoras, who we know is the inventor, shall we say, of the Pythagorean theorem. The whole numerology idea came from him, which he studied in ancient Egypt and even ancient Turkey, I believe. So that's kind of where that's coming from today, and that's why we know about those things.
It's interesting.
You're muted, Dad.
By the way, I'm muted. Sorry about that. The synchronicity that you're talking about is very interesting, and we discussed Pythagoras and the we discussed that. By the way, it's great that you're a police officer, a municipal police officer, or a state.
I'm a city cop.
City cop. All right, great.
I work in the Midwest, so.
Okay, all right. Well, appreciate you listening to our show, by the way.
Yeah, a bunch of us listen to you guys, so.
Well, cool. You guys, look, for as much as we talk about federal officers and police officers, there are a lot of great. I mean, a lot of my friends are police officers, so don't take anything that we say about you folks personally.
Well, no, the good ones don't make the news.
I think that some people just need to keep in mind, getting off onto this topic a little bit, keep in mind that in the same respect that there are forces at play on both sides of an idea, there are also forces at play that want the masses to distrust the police as well. I'm not saying that a lot of the videos that are shown aren't happening, because they are, but I think that in the same way that, let's say, racism can be blown out of a proportion to influence people to think that all of one group of people act in a certain way, that there's definitely a force that wants people to also distrust the police. So it's important to kind of take each side as it is, because, I mean, if something bad were to happen, you know, the first people that are called are the police, and we're usually more than willing to help people out. So,
yeah, I found that to be true, always.
Since you're a cop, if you don't mind me asking this, say there were something to happen and the government, says, you go in and gun confiscations or...
I was listening yesterday, and it's a good thing you didn't take calls yesterday, because you guys had me fired up, man. Holy cow. In line with the whole gun confiscation thing, as far as the municipal police department goes, we have a hard time answering most of the calls for service that we get on a normal day with our manpower issues, nationwide, really. I mean, look at Oakland. They don't respond unless you've been shot or there's a felony in progress. I mean, that's a lot more prevalent across the nation than you think. More with less. My city operates at 1973 staffing levels, and here we are in 2014, and we have about 50% more population, but we still do the same. So getting back on track here with the gun confiscation, it's not really going to be your municipal police department, I wouldn't see. Katrina would be a different story, where they brought, under the Patriot Act, so many departments are really federalized, so they brought them in and they did it that way. But that's a very microscopic view. I mean, just the manpower to take one home alone and the planning that goes into that is, I mean, you'd be surprised. It's hours of planning, and quite frankly, if you do 2 or 3, raids like that within a 1-day period, that's a lot for a municipality to handle. The only way I could see that happening is like a Connecticut state, or it was Connecticut, I believe, that passed that law where firearms and everything are legal and you have to go and register them and whatnot. Mm-hmm. The only way I could see that as happening is, they assume that most people are law-abiding citizens. They don't know about any of this stuff, and quite frankly, most of them don't want to know. So most of your population, you figure probably 80%, well, if it's illegal, I guess I'll have to turn them in. And then, you've got the lesser population, but by then kind of the jig's going to be up. And reading the story on Breitbart today, the feeling of the troops who don't want to be fed into the meat grinder anymore for this bogus war. I mean, I didn't sign up to take people's guns, and there's more of us than people would think who will quit and change sides. I mean, we didn't sign up to do this. We signed up to help people for the most part. And, I mean, yeah, you've got your bad apple here and there, but no. Honestly, the way that I could see that happening if it was like gunpoint confiscation is foreign troops. That would be the only, the logistical nightmare of going house to house is just astronomical.
Interesting perspective, and I have to agree. I couldn't see municipal police officers engaging in that behavior, or even on a county, or even a state level. I mean, I don't believe that to be the case.
And
so,
the federal guys, they get most of their power from using us, because we're the ones when they come into a town, you know. They don't know the people, they don't know the layout, they don't know the neighborhoods, they don't know anything about the place. So they attach themselves to us and then use a municipality to do their work. So, I mean, the federal government is kind of like like a paper tiger in some regards. I mean, yeah, they've got drones and they can just blow you up, but, you know, I mean, as far as a federal stormtrooper team busting your door down, I don't know. It would be more your local or even foreign troops, like I said, some sort of peacekeeping operation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to screw them up, just switch or just move the street signs, 90 degrees. Well, never mind. Well, my friend, wow. I'm glad you called, and I'm glad we have an audience there among certain members of your department. It's great.
I just put a quick word in about like preparations for people and things like that. Just some observations that I've made.
Sure.
Okay. Well, I would say, everybody needs to be a little more self-reliant, being prepared, and just having, let's say, gun ownership. Let's say, I've got my AR-15 and I've got 20,000 rounds of ammunition. I'm prepared. If they're going to take my guns, come and take it. Well, do you know how to use it? And that goes with everything. That's just an example that I wanted to give. The cans of food in your basement. Do you even know how to cook this stuff? Have you ever just gone into your home, flipped the switch for your breaker, and just lived for a day or two without energy? Which is a good way to test your preparations, because then, you have to rely on those things. Say, I'm off this weekend. I'm going to live for 2 days without electricity, and I'm actually going to use my plan and my preparations and find out where my weak points are before it happens. Because, as we say in police training, prior proper preparation prevents poor performance. So, that would give you an idea of things that maybe you will need down scenario, because I'm telling you what, with all this cold weather, when it was negative 40 degrees here, we actually had people calling the police because their furnaces didn't work. So, and just the idea that society itself has become to the point of where they can't even do anything for themselves, that it's almost like a skill that needs to be relearned. So that should be a large part of people's preparations, not just the physical, I have these items, but the actual knowledge of how to use it that's literally life and death. If you have a stove but you don't know how to light it, then you're dead.
I can't think of anything
to be thought about.
Really. I cannot think of any better advice than you just gave, because we do talk about long-term food storage. Yeah, exactly. How many people have ever cracked open a can and gone through making that food, or rehydrating the food and warming it up in the dark without a breaker, or without power, or at all? Very important. And thanks for cleaning that phrase up there. You forgot an extra P in there.
I took a pause so I wouldn't slip.
Yeah, but no, it's fantastic advice you've given. Really, and folks, please take heed to what this gentleman is saying, because he does know of what he speaks with respect to preparations and getting to have a trial run before you have to endure the real thing. And
it's always important to test it before you have to use it. So
that's right.
I'll let you gentlemen go. My name's Sean, and I will try and keep in touch on a regular basis. I called in earlier in the summertime, but I'll try and keep in touch a little more often, and kind of give you guys a report from the street.
We'd love it.
Here.
We'd love it, Sean. Thank you.
Thanks for the call.
Man,
try and talk to you guys again in a couple of weeks.
All right, buddy. Thank you, man. Stay safe out there.
Yep.
We need all the good guys that we can have out there.
Have a good night.
Well, we're out
right.
here, so
All right, buddy.
take care.
Thanks, man.
All right, we're going to go to one more call. 661. We're coming to you. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Hello, Doug. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yep.
Joe?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, this is Keith. I just wanted to call and contribute a little bit on a couple of events that have happened here in the past few days. And one of them is, I find it really interesting, is the sinkhole that formed in the center of a building at the Corvette Museum. And this is in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Now, this building is actually like a cone shape. And in the center of this building, they had, evidently they had 8 Corvettes. And this sinkhole, if you look at the picture, formed directly in the center of this hole. And they're saying that 8 Corvettes went down in this hole. Now, my opinion of this is that this is not natural. That this was contrived. And the reason I'm saying that is, in what world, does a sinkhole form, directly in the center of a multi-million-dollar corporation museum, and swallow up 8 Corvettes that are on display in this museum?
What would be the motive what would be the motive for that?
Okay, well that's what I want to explain, Doug. Now remember, we're talking about the destruction of America. Okay, we're talking about the tearing down of America, and all of these things you've been talking about, this occult symbolism and what have you. This is what I'm talking about. Now they have that slogan, and it says baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, and Chevrolet. So what this is symbolic of a very cherished Americana symbolism. Chevrolet is representative of the tearing down of a cultural aspect or symbolic, something that symbolizes what America is, which is baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, and Chevrolet. So that's my point on that. I just don't believe that it's an accident, and I really believe that a lot of these sinkholes that are being formed or that are happening around the country and around the world are being created by some type of, I would say probably some type of HARP technology, where they can actually. Now, we already know that they can find these oil deposits and mineral deposits. They can find deep underground military bases and tunnels and what have you. This has all been documented or shared by Nick Begich and others like this that are very familiar with this type of technology. And even people in the oil industry have talked about how they're using this to find these oil deposits.
You're right. Caller, I hate to do this to you. We got about 15 seconds left of the program. You're the last caller of the night. God bless you. But go ahead. Take your 15 seconds and take us out.
Yeah, well, that's my point. If you want to elaborate that on, in a later program, that's really all I have to share.
All right, buddy. Appreciate the call. Thank you. And that's something
stand about.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should look into that, because I did see that this morning, folks. We're at the end of the program. Gosh, it went so fast. God bless each and every one of you. Until tomorrow, have a safe night. Good night.